Very briefly, of course, the fundamentals of Orgon energy. What is Orgon energy units? What is the Orgon energy continuum? Very briefly, we saw the laws that regulates the behavior of these energetic units. And then we moved to see one of the many applications in biophysics. That was the cloud busting, the work on weather. But more than on weather is how to restore, as Reich intended it, how to restore the atmospheric pulsation. So with the cycles, continuous cycles of sun, rain, sun, rain, sun, rain, and so on. When this cycle is missing, means that something is wrong in the atmosphere. Because, strangely enough, because Reich said that the human being was not prepared to face such a drastic change in energy production, because by using the Orgon motor you produce work. You produce energy first and then work. Very low cost work, practically of no cost. And he said that at that time humanity was not prepared to face such a drastic change in the energy production and the use. He abandoned the job, the studies, and he published nothing about this, only two short communications, one available on cancer biopathy book, and the other one is very short, published in one of his research journal, as we saw this morning. But anyway, going on first with the Oranur field, Oranur reaction. Toward the ends of the 1950s, Reich started to use Geiger-Müller counted to study interaction between Orgon energy and radioactivity. He was thinking that radioactivity, the toxic effect of radioactivity could be mitigated or even annulled by using, by immersing these radioactive elements or radioactive source inside high concentration Orgon energy, inside an Orgon accumulator, for instance. And indeed, at the end, he was right. He was right because he obtained it at the end of the whole process, after many years, he obtained it a denaturated radium that is called Orur, that he used in the Arizona experiment, Arizona project. But in order to get the end of the project, he passed through a very dangerous, harmful, and practically critical phase, that is the Oranur phase. Indeed, what Reich did was to use the Orgon room that was located at Orgonon, and is a big Orgon accumulator. Big Orgon accumulator made by one internal layer of metal sheet, and then outside you have an organic layer, and then outside you have the layer of bricks, I suppose clay, made of clay or shale, I don't know exactly. So this is a one layer, one fold Orgon accumulator, a gigantic Orgon, extremely large, big Orgon accumulator, and was used by Reich at the time for the experiment. But he didn't put directly the radioactive element inside this Orgon room, but first he put this radium element, 1 milligram of radium needle, he put it inside a small charger. Charger means a small one-fold accumulator. One-fold means one layer of metal, one layer of organic material, one-fold. And then he put this small charger with the radium inside a 20-fold Orgon accumulator that in turn was inside the Orgon room. So a very high concentration of Orgon energy in this case, because it was subjected, the radium inside the small charge that it was inside the 20-fold, was subjected to a very high concentrated Orgon energy. Just a few sizes, the Orgon room, this one is, was 18 times 18 feet, 6 meter, around 6 meter each side. The height should be around 2 meters. I don't know exactly, but the height of the Orgon room is around 2 meters. The results of the Orgon experiment were devastating and bordered the catastrophe. Instead of lowering the radioactivity, quelling the radioactivity, Orgon energy became highly agitated. Dark clouds gathered over the laboratories, and practically the laboratories were abandoned, they left for some months because was impossible to live in, and they left for some months. All the participants were hit by a reaction that developed during the experiment and became ill to a various degree. We see later on which diseases they developed. The mice that he kept outside this room, just outside, close to the external wall, many died during the experiment, during 1 week experiment, the spell of the experiment was 1 week only. Many died during the experiment, and they were 256, and the others died soon after the experiment, in the following weeks. So practically, it was realized that in spite of all precaution taken, a protection to the phase reaction of this concentrated Orgon energy to practically very small quantity, incredible small quantity, 1 milligram of radioactive material didn't exist at all. So the experiment was concluded, was published a book on this. Yes? You want to make a question? Yes.
Can we assume that Reich, this was the first time he came in contact with the radium-226?
Yes, it was the first time that he was using radium-226, but not the first time that he was using radioactive material. He started to use radioactive material in 1939 when he was in Oslo. But he didn't study much the reaction of the radioactivity with Orgon energy, but I suppose he observed at that time, so it was 15 years earlier, 12 years earlier, he observed that there was a reaction of the radioactivity to high Orgon energy. But in 1951, it was the first time that he used this radium, 1 milligram of radium. 1 milligram of radium.
And
yes?
Did he get that radium?
Oh, he commissioned to a company in the USA. He had the permission from the AEC, and then after the approval, he commissioned it. He ordered the radium. In reality, he ordered 2 needles. One was used in the experiment, and the other one was considered as control and not used in the experiment. And then at the end of the experiment, he ordered a 3rd needle, just as a control of the 2 previous ones. Okay. Okay. What Reich did, this one is a layout of the facilities. The Orgon room is here. This one is the Orgon room. This one is the facility in which the student hall, in which the student laboratories, in which the Orgon room is located. And this one is the location when he put the control radium around 200 feet far, more than 200 feet, around 200 feet. And this one is the location that where he put the radium used in the experiment when not in the Orgon room. Which was the protocol? The protocol was to keep constantly the radium inside the small charger, inside the 24, inside the Orgon room continuously and check the reaction, check and monitoring the parameters, monitoring radioactivity, monitoring what could happen to the mice close by to the external wall, and monitor many parameters. And after the first day, the experiment started January 5, 1951. After the first day, the first needle was put inside the Orgon room at 11:30 a.m. And the background counts of radioactivity immediately before the radium was put inside ranged between 40 and 50 ppm. After only 1 hour and a half, they measured 50% more, 70, 80 ppm, and outside. And several hundreds at the external wall of the Orgon room, and was not, it didn't measure the radioactivity inside the Orgon room, but he presumed that it was extremely high, just after 1 hour and a half of experiment. So, according to these results, he decided to change the protocol, and instead of leaving continuously the material inside the Orgon room, he decided to take it out after a few hours. And indeed, the experiment was concluded after 5 hours of exposure, and then moved externally around far at a distance of around 250 feet. The day after, they decided to put, from January 6 to 11, to put the radium inside the charger, etc., 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 inside the Orgon room for only 1 hour daily, per day, because of the high radioactivity measured the first day. On January, and they did this, and they followed this protocol. On January the 12th, the experimental 1 milligram of radium was put in following the same protocol inside the 24-hour accumulator for only half an hour. Why? Because the experiment was stopped, interrupted, due to a sharp, drastic change of the environment. Because after the radium was placed in the atmosphere in the student laboratory outside the Orgon room, but inside the building, became clouded, shined blue to purple. So the color, the observer that were here, saw inside, through the windows, inside the student laboratory, that environment changed color from blue to purple. And so they decided to stop the experiment. And also they felt not very well. So they decided to stop the experiment. It was never resumed. It was never resumed again. So this is the duration of the experiment: 6 days, 7 days, for 1 hour only in the previous days, and for 30 minutes only in the last day. The reason for the interaction, apart the clouded in the change of the clouded atmosphere and the change of color inside the student laboratory, was also due to the severe reaction of the people to the Orgone field created during the exposure. They experienced severe belching, nausea, severe nausea, sensation of fainting, loss of equilibrium, clouding of consciousness, cramp on the stomach, weaknesses, pressure on the forehead. No measurement of the radioactivity was done, because it was extremely dangerous to do this type of measurements. But they were extremely high. So this is the experiment, the Orgone experiment. In other, what Reich created in this experiment even though he didn't know exactly the results, to create agitation, an extremely highly chaotic movement of the energy units inside the accumulator by using one of the most important activating agent, triggering agent, that was radioactive material. But he didn't know that he could obtain results like this, and indeed he was scared of the result and stopped, completed the experiment, even though he published the results in a book that is the Oranur experiment book. So the laboratory was abandoned for some months, and he made a list of the symptoms people exposed to the Orgon reaction could experience at the time. And this list includes some of the previous one, but also is adding some others: severe belching, malaise, nausea, pressure in the head, chest, cramps, and twitching in the muscles and the organ, hot and cold shivers, fatigue, pathological blood pictures, increase of white cells, inflammation of the conjunctiva, dryness of the throat, etc. Pneumonia, leukemic change in the blood picture, pneumonia, pleurisy, and inner bleeding. All these are symptoms that the collaborators, Reich himself and the collaborator, experienced during the experiment. Of the mice located in the student hall, 286 in total, 57 died during the experiment. The mice were never located close to the radioactive source, but they were located externally to the radioactive source. The radioactive source was here. The mice were located here, some meter far. But around 60 of them died during the experiment. 12 were used for autopsy, and the others, 217, survived during the experiment, but all died in the following weeks due to the consequence of the experiment. So it's a very dangerous experiment that was never, as far as I know, was never reproduced over the time. Only recently there is a publication in which a British researcher reproduced a small Oranur field by using an extremely smaller amount of radioactive material. Americium 241, I think. Very small amount, 1,000 times less than in potency than of the radioactivity than the radioactive source used by Reich. And he confirmed these results. He obtained it and increased. He kept it inside for 1 month, inside the big Orgon accumulator with other Orgon accumulators inside the big one. And he confirmed the results, and by measuring the radioactivity around and inside the Orgon accumulator and around the Orgon accumulator, and he realized that a field of, if I remember well, but it's reported on the paper published in JPOT, Journal of Psychiatric Organ Therapy, and if I remember well, the field that developed around was of 30-40 meters, the primary field, with a substantial increase of radioactivity. So, even though the source was extremely small. So, it's practically an experiment that, if must be reproduced by under strict close control conditions in a laboratory done by people that knows very well ergonomy, but most probably knows very well how to protect from radioactivity, taking radioactivity measure in order to protect from the reaction. The mice, autopsy evidenced a leukemia-like blood picture, pneumonia, severe fibrous exudate covering the pleural cavity, postmortem greenish T discoloration, distended veins, deformed red blood cells in the blood of the same shape of those found in leukemic mice, an high incidence of white cells, etc. A lot of symptoms, a lot of parameters changing in many parameters that led to practically, as Reich called, Oranur sickness. All these diseases or symptoms were grouped and were called by Reich Oranur sickness. Okay. What is the conclusion Reich drew from this experiment, from the results of this experiment? He concluded that the radioactivity developed and measured by the Geiger-Müller counter was due to the Orgon energy available in the environment when excited by the nuclear source. So what means this? Now we know that the theory, traditional science, is saying that the gas, the click on the counter is produced by direction of the gas inside the tube that in turn is reacting to an external cosmic rays or something like that. But according to Reich, instead, the clicking, the counts in the radioactivity measured by the Geiger-Müller are simply these Orgon units that are getting crazy, they're moving chaotically, and the Geiger-Müller simply is registering this hitting of these units against the measuring device, against the grid that then is transmitting the information to the measuring device. So is an opposite. Practically, the radioactivity measured by the Geiger counter is simply Orgon units, excited Orgon units. Those are affecting the measuring device. It is other conclusions that he drew. It is most likely even imperative to assume that quite ordinary materials such as rock, metal, and especially material arrangement, which have the faculty of accumulating Orgon energy, continue to be active long after the original triggering nuclear source has been removed. This means if you create an Orgone reaction and you produce for some time an Orgone reaction, all the materials, the accumulators, but also all the other materials, maybe what you have inside the room, the bricks, the walls, etc., are affected by this reaction. And the reaction, the effect of this reaction, the Oranur, is remaining even though you remove this source, the radioactive source. Indeed, Southgate, in his experiments, he obtained a prolonged Oranur field even when when he removed the americium from inside the Orgon boxes. And is lasting for a long time. Southgate, the British researcher, did this experiment last year, 1 year ago, more or less, and still today the Orgon boxes are producing an Oranur field after 1 year. So not only you produce an Oranur field during the experiment, when you are putting inside a radioactive material, but this Oranur field is going on and on with slower activity, going on and on in the time. So it's an extremely important experiment, but extremely dangerous experiment. And Reich wrote of this in his book, to be careful about the use of this reaction, whatever was the use not done in controlled laboratory, in controlled situation. Okay. Why? I'm speaking about the Oranur reaction. Yes. Okay. Sorry. But, yes.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but
Yeah.
so we know Geiger counters are notorious and sometimes not working, especially one made in 1951.
Yeah.
I'm not a nuclear physicist, but I know about the nuclear reactions and so forth. So considering that into effect, how do you measure the Oranur energy after the source is removed by having everything contaminated? By
Yes,
the radioactive
everything is
material?
contaminated by the field, yes. Was contaminated by the field, and they had to disassemble all the accumulators, all the Orgon devices, in order to reduce to the minimum the Oranur field. Otherwise, if they left all the Orgon boxes and the Orgon devices assembled, the Oranur field could be felt and measured for a long time. But they disassembled all the Orgon boxes in order to reduce to the minimum the Oranur field. So why doing this part before the Orgon motor? Because the Oranur reaction is the key to understand the functioning of the Orgon motor. Is the key, is the core. Even though it went after the studies carried out by Reich to develop the Orgon motor, at the end, Reich said that producing an Oranur field inside a controlled Orgon boxes, controlled means to control the Oranur field in order not to danger the outside environment, could be converted in electrical energy and then could be converted in work. So, this is the last conclusion of Reich. He started to experimenting with the Orgon motor by using different devices, different apparatuses. First, he used the tubes of the Geiger-Müller, and then he removed the gas from the tubes, creating a vacuum tube, a tube in which at very low pressure, 0.5 millibar, so practically zero in pressure, so no gas inside. And then he used these vacuum tubes in series. And other experiments, subsequent experiments, used Reich to use a small Orgon accumulator in which the Orgon energy was triggered by a small battery, 0.5 volt of a small battery, to start the excitation of the units. And then the attached motor ran without the battery that fueled the supply, the electricity. These are the first experiment that Reich did. And he never wanted to write about this Orgon motor, because he said humankind was not able to appreciate, to use this change of technology positively, and so he abandoned the project. He left just one chapter, a small chapter in a cancer biopathy book, and a small paper in the Orgon Energy Bulletin. But even though you are going to read them, you don't know about how to build it. There is no information. Just of anecdotal value. They are explaining how the motor is working, is running, but nothing substantial in order to be used to build the motor. Yes.
Earlier you mentioned 3 articles that kind of go more into detail about the Orgon motor.
Yes, I'm going.
I just want to make sure that...
Yeah. This one is the Cancer Biotic book, and this one is the chapter related to the Orgon motor. A motor force in Orgon energy. This one is the paper published in the Orgon Energy Bulletin. Anyway, Oranur experiment and the contact with space books are important to understand better the working principle of the motor. But contact with space, if you read carefully the book, you find here and there scattered many information on how to build the motor. So Reich, in a certain way, didn't want to publish all the design and how to build it, but at the same time, in his last book, scattered here and there in the text a lot of information on the working principle of the motor. So accurately reading the contact with space, you find many parts in which Reich says how to build, how to convert, how to build, create a motor force from Orgon energy, and how to convert this in work. But you have to read carefully this book. Okay, just to give more information about the motor, this part is taken from the paper published in the Orgon Energy Bulletin in 1949, few months after the development of the first motor, the first prototype. On June 24, 1947, I succeeded in setting a motor, this type of motor, into motion by means of Orgon energy motor force. Okay. In order to set the Orgon motor into motion, a certain function called Y is necessary. Never revealed it, never. And the function cannot be divulged at the present time. The sources of Orgon energy are the following. Orgon energy from the vacuum tubes, atmospheric Orgon energy from the atmosphere, Orgon energy from the earth, from the ground, and Orgon energy from the body, from the organism. No material is being used in the process of nuclear fission is required. The succession of impulsion can be regulated, and the potency or the speed of the motor is depending on the number of vacuum tubes connected, weather conditions, and the function Y. Okay, he concluded that there is no such a thing as empty space. Field actions are due to the activity of universal cosmic Orgon energy. This one is the motor he used. It's a very small motor. We have to think that this one was a prototype, was not a big motor that could light a city or from the energy taken to the atmosphere. Just a small motor, a prototype, that when the working principles are understood, could be reproduced in higher sizes. Indeed, the sizes are around 7 inches, 7 centimeters, more than 7 centimeters, and length for around 4 inches, 10 centimeters. A laminated steel stator and over-rotor made by a hollow cylinder of copper. This one is the motor that ran at the time fueled by Orgon, excited Orgon energy units, Orgon energy units. In the follow, yes.
I just wanted to ask, did I miss what you might have said about what function Y might...
Yeah, function Y. It's never revealed the function Y.
Right, what do you think you might have meant?
I did some assumption on this. And we think that the function Y is related to the Orgon energy phase.
The Orgon energy phase.
Phase. Or the density, in other words, the density, the orgonotic potential, the density of the Orgon energy units in the environment. So...
and there's no mention of it in the archives?
No. You don't find any information on the Y factor. No. We can see that some authors speculated about this, but there is nothing said. But we are not sure that the Y function is existing at all. Maybe it's not. Who knows?
What you mean, like you might have just made
Just because, in my view, it's so simple to understand the working principle that maybe knowing a Y factor, a Y function is not needed.
right.
For me, maybe it was real, maybe not. Depending. Maybe he introduced the Y factor, maybe to stop researchers, to stop people to continue the research on the organ motor. He's very confused, that part, that story of the organ motor, because he didn't want to divulge the theory, making short communication, only 2 short communication. Even at the archive at the Harvard Medical School, you don't find a mention of the organ motor. Papers and
There's not even anything about the motor in there at all.
No, you don't find. And he didn't want to divulge it, but at the same time, in contact with space, he scattered a lot of clues, a lot of information scattered, not put all together. You have to carefully read the book. And so it's controversial, his behavior. It's not clear. On one side, he didn't want to speak and to write about the motor. On the other side, he provided many information about the working principles of the motor. It's tricky, this part of research. It's tricky, controversial, this part of research of Reich. Okay, yes.
Is this orgon energy theoretically formulated?
Reformulated, what means reformulated? That
Yeah,
you
like
can...
any other type of energy.
No. Orgon energy are energetic units that are filling all the atmosphere. And simply exciting these units, you can create electricity that can convert it in work. We see this, how much left?
It's 3:50.
Oof. 10 minutes more.
We're in questions and answers. So.
Because I have still many slides. I just... Okay, just to respond you, and then we move faster. Okay, the books published by the Wilhelm Reich Museum after the death of Reich report some witnesses of the functioning of the motor. Schara, for instance, reported that it involved the use of an accumulator attached to a wheel. Concentrated organ energy was triggered by a small amount of electricity, an amount insufficient to retell the wheel without the accumulator. Bakers said that the motor ran on a half volt of electricity sent through an accumulator that was connected to the electric motor. When the motor was run on electricity alone, it took 25 volts. On energy only, it was practically noiseless and ran smoother and faster. At times, changed direction. Why? Well, the one I saw was about the size of a large orange. It was hooked up to a special organ accumulator with a Y factor that Reich didn't divulge, and it felt mankind was not ready, etc. Neil said, I couldn't understand Reich's theory of organ energy. It may exist, but what can one do about it? Reich said it was visible. I saw him work a motor with cosmic rays, or whatever Orgon is, work without any electricity attached, but when stimulated with a 2 volt, it went at possibly 1,000 revolutions a minute. The wheel rotated at 1,000 revolutions per minute. Taken from Appleton, Wilhelm Reich, Neil, and Orgonomy. Self-published. I think it is a booklet, a small booklet, self-published in 1990. His second wife, Ollendorf, is saying He also started in 1948 to experiment with a small Orgon motor. This work continued in Maine with the help of a young assistant who concentrated on the elaboration of this phenomenon. The young assistant disappeared after having stolen 2 prototypes and never was, they don't know where he went with the prototypes, and disappeared, totally disappeared from the scene. Reich made the motion pictures of the motor in operation, believed that this kind of motor could be used to move spaceships, and that they were propelled by Orgon energy and could reach tremendous velocity. So, at this point, what I show you is more or less the state of the art of the motor at the time of Reich. What we know about the Orgon motor. Reich never did electrical measurements in the accumulator to know whether the accumulator was producing the small accumulator used to contain the excited energy that was used to run the motor. Never they did measurements of electrical currents in the Orgon accumulator, and we did that. We did that in the last years, and we did some experiments using not an Orgon accumulator, but using a cylindrical capacitor made of 10 layers, 10-fold of alternating layers, organic paper, inorganic aluminum sheets. 1, 1, 1, 1 for 10 times. Two-fold to create a cylindrical shape. Connected all the metallical layers together, all the aluminum metallic layer together, all the papers layer together, and we measured the electricity produced at the 2 ends over the years. We did 5 years of measurements at the two cylindrical capacitor by using. I'm not an electrical engineer, so I don't understand much of this, but who did this measurement, these experiments? We did together in a laboratory these experiments, used 1 mega ohm resistance applied to the capacitor, and this practically corresponded, the tension measure corresponded therefore to the instantaneous power generated when the measurement was made. And this arrangement made the 2 capacitors behave as a current generator. So, at this point, what we got? This one. We got this behavior. We measure daily once, we did 1 measurement in the morning, maybe in some cases more measurements in the same day that were averaged, and the result was this. We started here, no current. We started in June 211, no current for some months. And then in September, October, the first current appeared. And then stopped in, in September, October, the first current appeared, and then stopped in June again, and then disappeared, and then again appeared in the fall, to disappear in the summer, to again appear in the fall, and so on for 5 years. So, what is the average of this 5 years measurement? Is this one. We averaged the same days, 5 years and days, and then we obtained a behavior like this for the 2 capacitors. No current at all until September, and then a curve like this, a shape like this, picking up in winter, and then decreasing again until to go to 0, practically 0, in late spring. All in any year we measured this, the tension, we obtained this behavior.
Why is that?
Why?
Why does that go up in the wintertime and come down at some
We tried to find an explanation because I don't know. We don't know at the time. And okay, this production days, average daily absolute tension. So, is not the current produced was not a function of the weather. Accumulator temperature differences affected by the weather, but not the measurement of the electricity. So what we observe this here, this graph reporting the tension at the beginning when it started increasing the tension. This is the highest value of the tension, and when it occurred in the winter time, and this one is the lowest value before going to zero. So we saw that the generation of current started here, picked it up in this period, and stopped again here. We considered the expansion, to explain this, we considered the expansion of the Orgon envelope, of the Earth.
Envelope.
Orgon envelope of the Earth.
Envelope.
Envelope, oh, sorry, envelope, okay. Okay. And Orgon envelope during the winter time is contracted. During the summertime is expanding. So what means this? During the winter time, you have a higher density of units on the ground. During the summertime, spring, you have a lower amount of units on the ground where the capacitors were located. What does it mean, this? This means that the capacitor behaved like artificial orgonotic systems. So, had a behavior like this. The capacitor was charged with Orgon energy units until to get the maximum holding capacity. And then it discharged, like a cloud that you enlarge, 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 and then you produce rain because it's no longer able to contain Orgon energy. And then it's discharging by, we measure the electricity, discharging by producing electricity. But what about the months in which they were not producing electricity? The months were the summer months, where the density is very low. The envelope was, I'm sorry, but my pronunciation is another synonymous. You don't have another word for much easier to pronounce.
Well, an envelope is the object.
Envelope, okay. So envelope is expanding. So the orgonotic capacity of the environment in the summertime is this one, and is lower than the capacity of the holding capacity of the condenser, the capacity to contain and hold units. But during the winter time is expanding, so there is a movement of this orgonotic capacity on the environment in this way, increasing the density. But when increasing the density is encounter the characteristic behavior of the capacitor. At this point, the capacitor is changing over energy again, 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 until it discharges. This is true for the period after June, July, the period after September, October, November. But when in the winter time, here is higher, the orgonotic potential, the density is much higher, the density of units at the ground, And in this case, you have a continuous discharge. Indeed, we measured in September, October, November, a discharge, but not continuous, all the days. We measured a discharge today, maybe another one after 2 days, another one after 4 days, and so on. But in the winter time, indeed, we measure current anytime we did the measurements. Anytime we did the measurement, we measured electricity in the winter period. That means that the orgonotic capacity of the environment is higher than maximum holding capacity of the capacitor, and is discharging continuously, is producing continuously energy, electrical energy. In the winter, while in autumn and in spring, is here, is moving here, and it takes time to fill up, to completely fill up the capacitor. So that's why you get a discharge after some time, not continuously. It's clear the point. We try to explain the phenomenon in this way, but it seems to work. Why? So, considering working this assumption, through this assumption, we thought, but if this assumption is true, why not to increase artificially the orgonotic potential when it's very low, artificially, when it is very low in the summertime? And we did that. But in which way? We used, we tried to produce a situation like this, in which in the summertime we have a potential of the environment higher than the maximum holding capacity, and in the winter time is increased accordingly, because if you increase one, the other one is increased accordingly. In which way we try to increase artificially this potential? We filled up a bottle, half a liter of capacity, with a fluid, water, salt water, and put the with a particular orgon capacity, 500 org. Okay, but this is just a measurement to quantify the energetic level of the fluid. But where we put the bottle? We put the bottle, plastic bottle, simple bottle that you use to drink water. We put the bottle inside here, in one of the two capacitors. So what happened in this case? This capacitor was subjected to the orgonotic potential of the environment plus the artificial orgonotic potential of the water. This capacitor not, because it continued to behave, to be subjected to the standard environmental capacitor. And what was the result in the dormant period? In the dormant period, what was the result? The result was this one. The red line is the red points are the points related to the capacitor where no artificial increase was done. And indeed, it was dormant again. But here you see that practically all the days, the other one in which was increased the potential produced electricity.
What? Say it again.
Electricity.
Oh, electricity.
So you have that in all the dormant period, the capacitor that was subjected to an artificial increase of the orgonotic potential started to produce electricity. But not only during the dormant period, it increased the electricity produced also in the other period. So compared to what happened in the previous year, the red one is the capacitor in standard condition and in the dormant period. And the cumulative tension is this one. The other one is similar, but is drastically increased when we put inside the water. We increased artificially the orgonotic potential. So we concluded also the tension increased in the artificially treated capacitor. So what is the conclusion? Part of the conclusion, because I have still 5 minutes. 5 minutes more, and then we
You're
stop.
already 10 over. Okay.
I am out of
10 over, yeah. But that's
10 over.
you're-
Okay. Okay, which is the conclusion? The conclusion is this one. I skip all the part. The conclusion is this one. We did measurement of the potential of the tension in an unexcited state. We don't know, but we know, but we don't know for sure, but we know. Most probably, the electric charge is increasing drastically to extraordinarily high values. Why I am saying this? Because the same researcher, Southgate, that did the Oranur, reproduced the Oranur experiment, after many months, he measured the electrical field and the magnetic field inside the Oranur box. Oranur because it still behaved like an Oranur, still produced an Oranur field. And what did it find? It found an increase compared to measurement performed very far from the Oranur box. In this case, we are not in the true Oranur field, because the Oranur field implies to put inside the radioactive material and to do the measurement. But we are much far, some months later, this moment, this period. And what happened? It found an increase of the electrical field compared to the electrical field on the environment, not Oranur state, of at least 3 times. And an increase of the magnetic field, voltmeter, and increase of the magnetic field in milligauss of around 2 times. This is, okay, concluding. So, this means that in an Oranur, in a phase after the Oranur reaction, we still have a very high electric field and magnetic field. So this makes one to think that during the Oranur reaction, this field, and hence the production of electricity, could be extremely high. From this point on, it's very easy. You have a very high production of electricity, and then you store the electricity, you stabilize the electricity, and you run the motor, provided that you are able to protect yourself and the environment by the Oranur reaction. You are correct. Okay, I'm concluding now. Okay, thank you.